Have you ever wondered what happens when two giants collide? One stays silent, while the other strikes back with force. It all began when Trump, the President of America, decided to impose a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports from Canada. But guess what? Canada, under the leadership of the new Prime Minister Mark Carney, wasn't going to sit idly by. Ontario immediately retaliated, slapping a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to America. The game was on. Imagine this: states like New York, Michigan, and Minnesota, which depend on Canadian electricity, are now caught in the crossfire. Trump is now forced to respond. Mark Carney, expected to bring in a new wave for Canada, made it clear that Canada could no longer trust America and must protect itself. "We will never bow down to a bully," Carney declared. "Canadians will always stick together. We won't stand by as tariffs hurt our workers and their families." But it's not just Carney Doug Ford. Ontario's premier is also not afraid to face off with Trump. This marks a significant shift in Canada's strategy. They're no longer the quiet ally, but a powerful partner willing to take bold action when needed. The 25% tariff on electricity exports could cost the American economy billions of dollars, especially states like New York that rely heavily on Canadian energy. The stakes couldn't be higher. According to data from the American Department of Commerce, the steel and aluminum tariffs reduced Canada's exports to America by a staggering $4.6 billion in 2018. Meanwhile, Mexico under President López Obrador is taking a very different approach. While Canada takes bold action, Mexico has opted for a more discreet diplomatic strategy. They aren't confronting Trump directly, but instead have chosen to negotiate quietly, minimizing public conflict. So why did Canada choose to confront Trump head-on? Carney made it crystal clear silence is not the answer. "If we stay silent, Trump will continue to disrespect us," he said. "That's why we chose to speak out, retaliate publicly, and demand respect from America." While Mexico has kept its silence, data from the World Trade Organization, WTO, shows that it has managed to maintain stable trade relations with America through discreet negotiations. But it's not just Carney making waves. Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, has played a crucial role in shaping Canada's defiant response to Trump, making Ontario a key player in this high-stakes trade war. This is no longer a diplomatic spate, it's a full-blown trade war. And Canada isn't just challenging Trump, it's demanding answers. US, when Trump raised tariffs on steel and aluminum, Doug Ford didn't hesitate to hit back by increasing electricity tariffs for US states, particularly New York, Michigan, and Minnesota. This was a tactical move designed to make the US rethink its decisions. And guess what? It worked. Trump's representatives had to sit down with the Ontario government for negotiations. This was a clear shift in how Trump treated Canada versus Mexico. It proved that Canada's tough stance wasn't in vain. Under the leadership of Mark Carney and Doug Ford, Canada sent a strong message: if you want our respect, you'll have to fight for it. This trade war is far from over, but Canada and Mexico may gain the upper hand if they continue using smart and bold strategies. Trump will find it harder and harder to maintain his bullying tactics in a world where countries can unite against unfair policies. Stay tuned, the upcoming developments will leave you shocked. Lately, Trump has been looking increasingly exhausted. The US economy is teetering on the edge of disaster. GDP is projected to drop by 2.8% to 3% in the first quarter. The stock market is plummeting, and top CEOs are losing confidence. Yet, instead of addressing these crises, Trump spends his time ranting on social media about completely unrelated issues. Something is definitely wrong. Conservative media, which once fully supported Trump, is now turning on him. Even the Wall Street Journal, a longtime ally, is calling his trade war the most foolish in history. And they're not alone. Chief Executive magazine reports that CEO confidence in America is at its lowest since 2012. A survey of 220 top executives reveals growing fears of economic instability, with many calling Trump's tariff policies a disaster. You know what? Want to hear something? We always win. But the truth is, Trump's top economic advisors are being bombarded with calls from major business leaders, begging for action before a full-blown recession takes hold. Trust me, what's coming next will shock you. Trump is glued to social media while the economy freefalls. What's he doing? Spending hours on Truth Social, posting about Elon Musk, instead of rolling out a plan to stabilize the economy. Trump is fixated on praising billionaires and picking fights online, while the US economy spirals. Meanwhile, a recent poll from Michigan, a critical battleground state, shows that 70% of voters disapprove of his leadership. A former White House advisor confirmed, "We thought he'd focus on inflation, taxes, and job growth. Instead, he's on social media all day." Trump's priorities are completely out of sync with what Americans actually need. Social Security is at risk, while everyday Americans struggle with rising costs. Trump is considering cutting Social Security call, sent us a move that would make it harder for seniors to access their benefits. We have to look at cutting some of these bloated programs, Trump said. A report from the Social Security Administration warns that privatizing Social Security could lead to skyrocketing healthcare costs, while reducing the effectiveness of these programs. So, who benefits? You guessed it, big corporations. If Trump hands control of Social Security to Wall Street, it's game over for millions of seniors. Trump declares war on paper straws while the economy spirals. Trump is laser-focused on banning paper straws. The Justice Department is now backing his push, claiming they're expensive, ineffective, and bad for consumers. Critics say this is just a distraction tactic keeping people fixated on nonsense instead of the real issues: skyrocketing inflation, job losses, and failing economic policies. Is this really the best use of a president's time? The Guantanamo immigration nightmare. In a shocking move, Trump ordered that undocumented immigrants with no criminal record be sent to Guantanamo Bay. His reasoning: protect national security. He said they were keeping the worst criminals away from American cities. But here's the catch: a Fox News report revealed that none of the 290 detainees were criminals. Just weeks later, they were quietly released back into the U.S. A total PR disaster. Experts say this is another case of Trump playing politics with immigration while offering no real solutions. Trump's allies defend the economic collapse. Even as the U.S. economy crumbles, some of Trump's closest allies continue to defend his policies. No pain, no gain tariffs make America strong, they say. But data from the Federal Reserve tells a different story. The U.S. economy is facing a 3% GDP decline, the worst in years. Yet Trump's officials continue to insist that we are having the best economy ever. The truth is, since Trump took office, the stock market has fallen harder than other major economies, showing that his trade policies are hurting, not helping. And the worst part? This is just the beginning. Stay tuned, the next developments will leave you stunned. The U.S. has just imposed a 50% tariff on Canadian goods, with an unprecedented condition for removal. Canada must become the 51st state. This shocking policy has sent shockwaves across economic, political, and business circles. A top economist has slammed the move, questioning whether it's a strategic play or a catastrophic gamble. On March 10, 2025, the U.S. administration announced a 50% tariff on all Canadian imports. While the U.S. has used tariffs as a trade weapon before, this is the first time such an extreme condition has been tied to a tariff rollback. Canada must become part of the U.S. America and Canada are deeply intertwined economic partners. Total trade between the two nations hit $793 billion in 2023, with Canada being America's top trade partner, making up 14% of U.S. global trade. 75% of Canada's exports flow directly to the U.S., making it highly dependent on American markets. If the 50% tariff holds, both economies will face serious damage. Canada supplies 50% of U.S. crude oil. Imports higher tariffs could send oil prices skyrocketing, raising manufacturing and transportation costs. The aluminum and lumber industries will be severely impacted as well, with higher costs for cars, homes, and consumer goods. Experts predict that this policy could drive U.S. inflation up by 1.8% within 6 months, worsening America's ongoing economic struggles. Stay tuned, expert reactions and business fallout are just beginning to unfold. Immediately after the announcement, CNBC's chief economist, Steve Leisman, blasted the policy on live TV, calling it insanity. He argued that the U.S. lacked a clear strategy and was destroying market confidence, harming its own economy. Financial markets plunged in response, with the S&P 500 falling 2.1% in just 24 hours. The Canadian dollar lost 4.3% of its value, raising import costs for Canadians. Stocks of FedEx, General Motors, and Boeing dropped between 3% and 5%. Signaling concerns in supply chains and global commerce. Major corporations are sounding the alarm. Apple and Tesla warned that tariffs on Canadian components would disrupt supply chains, slow production, and raise consumer prices. Ford and General Motors rely heavily on Canadian auto parts. If tariffs persist, new car prices could jump by $2,500 to $4,000. Did the US government really think this through? Keep watching, things are about to get even more explosive. Canada didn't hold back. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau immediately rejected the U.S. demand, stating, "Canada is not for sale. Our sovereignty is non-negotiable." Ontario Premier Doug Ford added, "American businesses fear this policy, but they're too scared to speak out." Canada is ready to strike back. Canada is preparing retaliatory tariffs on U.S. agriculture, steel, and tech products. This could send food prices in the US soaring by 8 to 12%, directly impacting millions of American families. Is this a win for America or a massive economic self-inflicted wound? Even within America, backlash is erupting. Republican leaders are deeply concerned, warning that damaging ties with Canada could destabilize key US industries and weaken international alliances. Corporate America is also pushing back. Amazon, Walmart, and Tesla argue that tariffs will increase costs for US consumers and hurt spending power. Financial analyst Jim Cramer warned that a trade war with Canada could trigger a recession in the US. Manufacturers are considering moving production out of the US, leading to massive job losses. So is the US truly gaining from this? Or is this the start of an economic disaster? This radical trade policy has already shaken markets, alarmed businesses, and outraged America's closest ally. The economic consequences could be devastating for both nations. The big question remains, will the US back down? Or is this just the beginning of a full-scale economic war? Stay tuned. This story is far from over. Why does Fox News continue to applaud Trump as the US economy? Free falls and allies turn away. Could the truth be getting hidden from the public? Under Trump's leadership, the US economy faced its fair share of storms. Despite constantly claiming to be a business expert, the tariff policies and trade wars he initiated led the US economy into a recession in 2020. The US stock market saw its largest value drop since 2008, with the S&P 500 losing nearly 34% of its value in the first quarter of the pandemic. According to a study from Harvard University, Trump's tariff policies cost American consumers an additional $7.8 billion in 2019, driving inflation and reducing purchasing power. While unemployment dropped in the first few years, by 2020, the unemployment rate exploded due to the pandemic, hitting a record high of 14.8%. Meanwhile, Fox News continues to air programs supporting Trump, even claiming tariffs don't cause inflation and the economy isn't as bad as T.